and welcome to the Lens of Reflective Leadership. I think that's what we're going to call this. But I'm in my 20th year of education. I am currently the principal of Charles Elementary for Richmond Community Schools. Prior to that, I was a kindergarten teacher for 12 years, second grade, third grade, reading interventionist, and then e-learning specialist before I jumped into leadership. So here is Carrie Ann Polkmeek.
Hey, well, I'm going to sound really old because this would be my 25th year. That's for sure. I spent 15 of those years in the classroom as a secondary social studies teacher. I was, like Phillips, I was a coach for a couple of years, still had a foot in the classroom, but spent most of my time working with adults in data and classroom practices. I was an assistant principal at the high school for a year, dived headfirst into an elementary principalship.
Which is where I met her.
Which is where we met. And then for the past 2 years, I've been the principal of an intermediate building, which is a 5 through 8. And I work currently for Richmond Community Schools.
Absolutely. Mine's pre-K to 4, by the way. I forgot to say that. But so Carrie and I, we talk every morning. And one of the things that we've realized is we're both very reflective in what we do, maybe too reflective at some points. And it's not just for us. It's not just about leading. It's about friendship and everything else. But what we wanted to do was put ourselves out there and maybe do something a little bit different with what we're learning through our reflection, good, bad, and ugly. I mean, there's lots of different aspects of this. And so what we want to do is just put ourselves out there, be as transparent as possible, and hopefully you learn something with us as we learn from one another during what is, I'm going to use the word unprecedented. Is that right? Or is it unpresidential?
Just everything's kidding. Unprecedented right now.
Unprecedented. Sure. That is same with self-care. That's another buzzword, but we're going to get into that a little bit more too, right? During this pandemic. So where do you want to start, sister?
All right. Well, we had started to connect recently over a new book by Dr. Desatel. She teaches at Butler, and if you haven't had an opportunity to learn from or to visit any of Dr. Desatel's book, I would recommend highly her newest book, Connections Over Compliance. We've worked as a district with Dr. Desatel for many years, right? And yeah. I think Phillips and I have both had multiple opportunities to work with her. And I think, though, that when we started this, it really started out as a way that we were reading and talking about this book together. So we were meeting and talking in the morning or on the way home from school, and we were pulling bits and pieces of the book down together. And we thought that it would be important to maybe do a dedicated book study, which kind of led us to sharing that book study. And then in the broader sense, how we reflect as leaders. So I thought we were going to start with that first preface, because that to me spoke volumes about why we would even want to think about, in the middle of a pandemic, our discipline practices and the ways that we work with kids.
Right. I think that's a perfect place to start. One of the things that I do is I journal. You know that about me, and I blog. We both blog. But I think that after I read, that's the kind of learner I am, is I have to write things down. And so I do have notes over the first preface of what I'd like to share or just throw out there and just have an honest, authentic conversation, because we've talked about it in bits and pieces, and I have bought this book for my staff. And so hopefully they are following along eventually once we put this out as a book study to begin with. But I guess we start somewhere, right? Jump in. So yeah. the quotes to ponder, I've got lots of them. And I'll throw the first one out there. It's the aching desire to feel heard, seen, and felt. Heart of embodied relational discipline practices. So let's put that in the perspective, the frame of the pandemic right now, because that's where the context of this preface falls. Mine is adults, and I know you're going to talk about kids, so you start.
Oh, well, I think it's a little bit of all of it. We've had a very unusual situation. So in our district right now, our 5 through 12 kiddos are hybrid. And we have virtual only. But no matter what, even if they choose to do brick and mortar at all during the week, it's an every other day thing. And so that idea of being heard and seen and felt is much different this year. And I got to tell you, I've thought about this in relationship to discipline practices. because I was really busy at the beginning of the year, patting myself on the back, not myself, but my proverbial team on the back, because our discipline referrals had gone down so dramatically. And while I can say that some of that is a result of some of the practices that we put in place, absolutely different, it is in some ways because kids aren't present as often, meaning that their desire or their need or the trust that they might have to be seen or to be heard when they are in need is less. I don't know. Did that make sense at all?
Yeah.
What I try, I don't know
Well,
how I
you're
said it
going
at
from
all.
a building
So
of 700 plus kids to 300 some, and they're not even there
yeah,
consistently.
and right. And so some of what we have to recognize when kids are being discipline problems or they're exhibiting anxiety, which we would consider to be a discipline issue, is that they're voicing a relative need. And one of my fears during this pandemic is they're not seen or heard enough to even manifest those kinds of things in relationship to what they might need from us as adults in the building. I don't know. That's kind of a new thought. I'm still trying to eke it out a little bit.
Yeah, and I think I have a total different perspective because we're pre-K to 4 and our kids are there every day. And so they're very resilient. They come, they wear their mask, they do what they need to do. Our behavior problems or opportunities are null and void. Like we have a handful of referrals for the whole year, which I would like to compliment, to everything that we've put in place up until this point, relationships being number one. But I think my perspective is more about the adults and making sure that they are seen, heard, and felt during this time because they're not only taking on all these new responsibilities that we're asking them to do, but also trying to work out their own traumas, not being able to see their own families. If they do have sickness within their classroom, quarantining, and then not being at work and trying to make that connection of still being heard and felt as their teacher from home from a distance. And so we know that relationships are the big thing. And the one thing I am proud to say is I think we have had that shift in Richmond, that behaviors are a form of communication. It's
Really.
not something being done or heard to us, but at our two different levels, there is a different perspective. And with the behaviors, the way the behaviors come out, I think, and that's just the natural. I don't know what you think about that, but I think that's just the natural beast of going from elementary to middle level, right? Like the change in the
Well, I mean,
behaviors
I
and
think being middle level and having all of the anxiety of just being a middle level kid and then doing it in the middle of a pandemic is very difficult. One of the things that I've learned through my study with Dr. Desatel, and I guess this is a better way for me to say what I was thinking, is that often, there are kiddos, and she likes to call them fawns, meaning that they don't say anything. On the surface, they appear to be very, very, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, just do what they're told kind of kids. I mean, now they're acting out in other ways. Maybe they have all F's, or, maybe they're more inclined to sleep in class, or they don't participate verbally or in any, but I think that I think we have more of that in our building right now. And that's more concerning because I think we're going to see more mental illness, more issues around the mental health and well-being of kiddos than we've ever seen before. And having been a principal for 6 years in high poverty schools, I'm not quite sure how that's possible. And it scares me a little bit. But I do have to say something though. Very much the way in which the adults in our buildings have been responding to kids has also very much changed the game. I'm not trying to negate or say that the changes in the training and the frameworks that we put into place aren't impacting, because they are. In relationship to COVID and the way people the kids are responding is what's so different. Tell me more about how you're taking care of adults. And because I think that what you kind of alluded to that I'm most interested in is how she talks about this in relationship to hermeneutics. Like, you're so much better at contextualizing situations and building culture around them than I am. So tell me more about that.
okay, so part of me as a leader is always being as transparent and sharing my story, right? So I think it's really important that I understand and know all of my staff stories. I think you do the same thing. You have a larger staff than I do, so I know it's probably a little bit more complicated. But I think one of the things that I have to make sure as a leader for kids is that they are in a safe environment, and that starts with the adult. And so making sure my adults feel safe in their environment. So I'm very cautious and empathetic with my words when I'm talking to my staff, and making sure that they understand that the greatest gift they can give their students is just for them to be present in that moment, to be responsive in their teaching. And so giving them that safety to feel like if they mess up, it's okay. And it's not, things are different this year, and you're going to get some grace, right? There's another buzzword is that grace word. But I really think it's true in the fact that our culture will reflect how it's led. And so I have to give them grace when they're having that bad day, just like I hope others around me are giving me as well.
Well, I'm just going to lay it out there because that tends to be the person that I am.
Right.
And so as I was reading this a couple of times now, and I think it might be my third time through, I wonder what you think as you start to do this with your staff. The response is going to be to something that says, we are now called to explore and redefine discipline protocols from a place of crisis and opportunity with the initial perceptual shift on adult behaviors. So I'm wondering, the Carrie that was introduced to this 4 years ago would have been highly suspect and a little put off by a book that suggested that my behavior, the way I was behaving, my place, was impacting kids, and that I had to own that. Do you have any fears around jumping into that with your adults, or do you think I'm just seeing this the wrong way? I don't see it that way now. I'm
Not
just
now,
thinking about
no.
it from the perspective of before.
It's one of those things where, and not all adults are reflective either. Not all adults can have an open and honest conversation about strengths and weaknesses. Some are very guarded still, and I know who those people are. But I think that those protocols that you put in place for data routines, right? All of the protocols that you put in place, they have to be embedded in everything that we do. So they have to be embedded in our procedures, in our morning routines, in our transitions. And so making sure that, yeah, you are in charge of how you lead your classroom, that it's going to be almost it could be a defensive moment. And I think that's where you take the opportunity and you connect those who are open to that thought process, and connect them to those who are a little bit more guarded. And you just continue to model that with them. But definitely there's always going to be, I think there's always going to be that perspective of kids should do it this way, and it should be my way. And that's why we're in this leadership position, is to help others see that it's not about our way. It's about making sure we're creating that safe environment, and our attitude every day sets that tone. So my attitude every day sets the tone of the building. Your attitude sets the tone of the building. And then it becomes the teachers.
Then everybody's in trouble. I'm kidding.
Wait. That's why you call me every morning. Your staff can thank me for that call every morning.
But I think you're right. And obviously I asked that question for a very specific reason, because I think that the thing that I took away from this that was the most important is that right now what we're doing, the context of what we're all sharing and all jointly experiencing, is the absolute perfect opportunity to build capacity and reflection in everyone that we serve, in a way that, because of this shared experience, in a way that seems less like, this isn't about you doing something wrong, because I think that's always potentially what people might hear or might read into something, and more about, because of the moment that we're in, and how we take this moment, we talk about it in the context of then the way we're approaching kids and kid behavior, and move from there. What do you think? And that's the other thing then that I thought about too, is that then how do you said something about modeling it. So how do you model that with adults? When you talk about changing the way that we're disciplining kids and the way that we're approaching kid behavior, how do you model that so that the adults around you see it?
So one of the things that we've taken on, especially with The virtual students are it's this SEL curriculum. But after reading this preface, what I've learned is that you can't have a set curriculum. I guess you can have a framework, but it has to be a responsive curriculum. You have to have this toolbox of focused attention practices, and social stories that you can use with your staff and students. But your staff really needs to model that and live it too, not just deliver it to kids. But it has to be responsive SEL, because here we are as a district trying to create this curriculum. And I started thinking about, I think it's a great framework. I think it's a great starting point. But just like responsive teaching, we're going to have moments where we need to be able to grab into that toolbox what we need at that moment, not what's on the master list of what we need to teach for SEL. And it can't be forced. So it's got to be natural. It's got to be a natural process. And how do we get teachers
It's
there?
very much, it's everything. It's not a program that you can buy.
Right.
It's not a dojo or a live school
Right.
or a point system. It's infused in every single moment of every single interaction. The way you model in front of your secretary and clerical or treasurer, that angry parent that's come in their hot brain, and how you listen to them and help guide them down the path all the way through the front office, all the way through to the cafeteria, all the way through to every single movement. We still have passing period, or we have passing periods in a secondary building. And the way that I approach kids, the way I react to kids, it was really kind of a neat moment that this past week that I started to notice more and more. We tell kids all the time, my vice principal and I, that we love them. And we mean it. And not as this like grandiose platitude, but I love that you just, I love the unique things that you bring to this building. And I don't know what happened or when it happened, but I must have heard people tell each other they love each other in the hallway about 10 or 15 times in that week before break.
That's
and
awesome.
I thought, okay, so it's a way of being, it's a way of modeling. I hear more and more people in the building every day say, how can I serve you? I don't know. Just it's kind of the small things, but you're right. I love that you talked about that as a curriculum.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that when I was reading through this because I'm a fixer, kind of like you. And one of the things that I connected to my own self is that no matter the best therapy, the best medication, it's not going to matter unless you have lasting and caring relationships and connections with people. And so that's the biggest thing, right? Connections over compliance. That connection piece is so vital for all of us. Even the connection between you and I is vital for my leadership. I think that we can't move forward unless we have that one adult in that building that kids can connect to, or that one adult other adults can connect to. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. At the end of this is it does come back down to the relationship, the connection.
Always. And the connection and the relationship doesn't mean, and I'm going to say this for all my secondary people out there real quickly, it doesn't mean that kids are consequence free, or that they're able to do whatever it is that they feel like that they want to do. It is in relationship to having really high expectations for them academically, socially, and behaviorally, but understanding that framework, that connection piece has to be there in order for them to be successful. And I think that's the bigger piece. And I remember in my first week, well, I didn't do this when I started at Star. I didn't. I thought you did something wrong, and I just said, you go fix it, and here's how you're going to fix it, and it's punitive, and it's what I knew, right? And that's how I managed it. The point at which I started to see more and more of how those relationships and how the way I approached kids mattered and changed things. And I remember that in my first week, even at test, sitting beside a kid in crisis, and I remember just like people looking at me like I had grown a second head. But I do think that those are the pieces of it that are the most important.
Right. The first chapter, we're going to jump into discipline. So I think that's a good segue into maybe wrapping this first one up, because if it's too long, no one's going to watch us. Maybe we're the only two crazy people.
Anyway. But I just admitted to everybody that my brain state. So I have a hot brain a lot. It's really, I go in and out of my hot brain. I've gotten better at getting out of my hot brain. But I have to acknowledge that this piece of it has really changed me for the better. Did you want to talk about, so at the end of the second preface, there are 2 prefaces.
Yeah.
She has a list of 12 questions.
Yeah, let's go there.
I mean, I'm not going to look at all 12, but I am going to tell you that of the ones that I'm going to think about, that maybe I would even start with you the next time we talk, is how I'm going to help to reset the desire to learn and hold a calm presence based on the trauma and adversity from the past several months, when many of our students have lost connection and safety.
Right.
So that's going to be the thing that I'm going to reflect the most on before our next conversation.
Right. And I think one of the things that I'm going to reflect on is, telling your story. What is your story? Am I willing to share your story? I think we're in the middle of that, creating safe spaces, though, for kids to feel that way and for teachers to feel that way. And I think that'll open the door for having those conversations about reflection. And I think the other one is the language shifts that we need to happen, especially at the elementary level, that our words, the way that we embrace our connections with our words. So one of the things we've been talking about with PBIS is, instead of calling it a timeout, talking about doing that reset. We're not there yet 100%. We still use timeout, but I think changing the language shift to make sure that we're listening and trusting and showing kids that with our words. Those are the 2 ones I'm going to dive into.
Well, there are so many here, but I think that's it, is how I come back with adults. But I really also really like the idea of being able to appreciate the opportunity to connect and learn from every student's experiences.
Right.
And how I relate to them based on the experiences they bring. So I'm going to grab that one too, and then I'll be really glad to share that with you.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to our first podcast. We'll be open for feedback. So tweet us your likes, your dislikes, maybe some questions you want us to ponder. If you are on this journey with us and you want to share in the learning, give us a shout out, and maybe you can be a guest on one of our podcasts. Like, we need guests.
You can be a guest.
Yeah, you can be a guest. So, all right, friends, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you. Hopefully, are we going to do this every week? I think we should do it every week.
I think we should.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Look for us next week. All right. Thanks for tuning in. And maybe if you're lucky, we'll get some music before and after our podcast. Who knows?